This next one, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi.
All right.
All right, what? I'm reading a question.
Well, I'm not surprised.
What are your thoughts on NBC's Young Rock TV show? Do you think it will be a hit?
Well, I mean, I can see where the concept would be a hit, but since I've not seen a trailer or a clip or who knows what they're going to do with it. I mean, you've heard or seen surefire concepts in the past that they've totally, just dropped the ball on. And also sometimes things get over that you wouldn't dream would get over from the synopsis. So he had a wild, wacky childhood, and he's one of the biggest movie stars in the world. So I can see that working. I don't know how they're going to.
It is going to be a bit weird to see them portraying Rocky Johnson as a decent human being on the show.
No, now, come on now. I mean, I don't know how they're going to find people, how they're going to portray the wrestling business, how they're going to find people that looked in any way like these people, how they're going to recreate the time. I mean, he's talking about his time in Nashville. I guarantee you they're going to find no place else that looks like the Nashville Sports Arena unless they go there in person. I don't know if Hollywood writers are going to be able to transfer what being around the wrestling business was like in the 80s, or if it could play on television if they did. And I assume Rock is going to have a significant amount of control, but I don't know that he's going to sit there and write every single script by himself. So, I mean, I'm tickled to see what it's going to be, but I have no idea how it's going to look or how it's going to go or whether it's going to be I don't see the show doing anything to make mockery of wrestling or, cast it in a bad light in that respect that it's just this bullshit thing. But at the same time, how do you do it? I don't know how they're going to do it.
What do you think has been the best portrayal of the wrestling business on either film or on a television show?
It's so hard to do and to recreate. And, Paradise Alley had the coolest wrestling, but it was still, it was, of course, that was during the Depression era. It was a period piece as well. And it wasn't really technically the professional wrestling business. It was just kind of a weird thing that was going on in that location at that time. I mean,
what'd you think of Mickey and Maude? Did you ever see that?
Mickey and Maude.
The Dudley Moore movie had like Andre the Giant, Hardboiled Haggerty, Big John Studd.
Oh, you know
Jay
what?
Strongbow.
I don't think I did, actually. If I did, it was 40 years ago. I mean, the Wrestler was great for wrestling fans because, Vern Gagne just spent some money and had the movie made. So it was great for wrestling fans, but it's kind of a crummy movie. But then you have the movies that are kind of good movies are a crummy and misrepresentative example of wrestling. Remember, Henry Winkler was supposed to be in the biography of Gorgeous George, and then it just became a bleached blonde wrestler because they couldn't get the rights and the one and only. And like Henry Winkler could ever look like a pro wrestler.
Yeah. That was Roddy Piper's first movie.
Yeah. They would get, that's the way some of the guys would get parts in movies back in those days, is if somebody was doing a movie peripherally about wrestling or what they thought wrestling was. So some of the real guys would get in the movies, but the movies would bear almost no reflection to the real wrestling business.
Yeah, Gene LaBelle got a lot of those guys because he was doing stunt work. And he would get some of them work, like Mondo Guerrero and Roddy Piper. And it got them their SAG cards, which was a wonderful gift to have if you're an active wrestler.
Yeah, well, the same thing in the 40s and 50s. A lot of the guys working the LA territories would get in movies or TV shows when parts were called. Billy Varga was all over the place. And then we talked about Mighty Joe Young not long ago. All those guys, or at least most of them, were working in the late 40s in the Los Angeles area. Miniker and oh God, who was the whole list? Wee Willie Davis and Primo Carnera.
Mike Mazurki, of course.
Mike Mazurki, who he was still wrestling at that point, but he'd already been in movies for a while because of that face. And Man Mountain Dean was big in Southern California. So that's the way the guys would get in. But sometimes you have to go back and watch those things like the Three Stooges shorts where they did a couple of wrestling shorts or whatever to get footage of these great famous wrestlers from that period, because there's so few wrestling films still in existence. You like that The Night in the City with Richard Widmark is a 1950 movie, and Zbyszko was had to be 60 years old at that point, but it's an opportunity to see one of the greats from the pioneer era and what he looked like, because they did a serious wrestling scene. And that was the style of wrestling, stylized for the movie, but kind of that you would have seen in the 1920s. So you get to see that, even though there was no contemporaneous stuff still left, but you could see him do that movie scene. But so many of the guys were just doing comedy stuff, with sound effects and be rolling around. In the background of W.C. Fields' movie, The Man on the Flying Trapeze, the whole movie is about him trying to get tickets and get off work to go see the big wrestling match between, what was their names? Hukalaka Mishabab and the Russian Giant or something or other. And then in the closing scene, he almost gets into the fucking match, and one of the guys gets airplane spun and thrown out of the tent and fucking knocks him over. So, it's a way to see some of those guys, but you don't actually get to see a lot of serious wrestling. I don't even mean serious. I mean real, actual. They didn't wrestle like that in their matches, even though they were still a work in those days. So you don't get to see them doing what they did in front of people, but you at least get to see them themselves.